We begin with a day that only comes once in a president's tenure, the day a sitting president announces a bid for re-election. Now, this development itself is obviously not any kind of surprise. People knew Donald Trump was running again, just like they knew Obama was running again. But even in this untraditional era, this is actually a very traditional marker. It is a moment for a president to ask the nation for support and to show where he stands. Is he doubling down on his original campaign or changing gears? For Trump, well, he's formally declaring his re-election bid on the same issue he began with, targeting immigration, and in this new statement, threatening to deport millions. And let's be clear, when it comes to this president, he makes no pretense of separating the political operation from the governing. Because as his campaign launches on slamming immigrants, his administration, his government, is trying to evict entire families from public housing based on a trigger of one member of the household allegedly being undocumented. He's also trying to tighten rules for asylum border screenings. And, of course, continuing to detain more than 13,000 children who are unaccompanied, largely because of the government's own choices, and now resorting to using a military base that was once deployed as a Japanese internment camp. So before even stepping on stage tonight, we can show you right here, Trump is already drawing headlines for the message, an immigration crackdown, obviously echoing his very first remarks after he descended that escalator. You remember him going right down the escalator to introduce himself to the world as a presidential candidate and explain his priorities at Trump Tower.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
That's how he started his bid for the White House. Now, at today's rally, we had a reporter catch up with some Trump supporters, and they believe he's on the right track.
You got your Ice Ice Baby shirt on.
We're hoping that he'll reinforce his original campaign promises of building the wall and keeping the illegals out. I lived in Arizona the past 11 years. We see it every day, the illegals coming across. The trash, the disease, these people aren't interested in assimilating.
He doesn't lie. I know y'all say he does. He doesn't. He doesn't.
He's done his promises, and he's building the wall.
So that's the view from the Trump base in Orlando, but they don't speak for the whole city. Take the Orlando Sentinel, a major paper that's mostly endorsed Republican candidates for president in the past 60 years, including Romney in 2012. Well, that paper's making waves tonight with this unprecedented preemptive strike declaring they endorse not Donald Trump for 2020, writing, "We've seen enough. Enough of the chaos, the division, the schoolyard insults, the self-aggrandizement, the corruption, and especially the lies told out of ignorance, laziness, recklessness, expedience, or opportunity." Now, Trump doesn't take that kind of criticism well. Today, he's lashing out against negative feedback, including a poll from Fox News that shows opposition to his economic policies and also shows him trailing against Democrats. Now, look, it is too early for most polls or even these endorsements to indicate much of anything about a race that's so far away. But Donald Trump is clearly betting that the road to 2020 runs through the past. This is a made-for-TV candidate who literally plagiarized another president's campaign slogan from the 80s and passed it off as his own, who is now relaunching in 2020, quoting himself from 2016. And since there's a lot of quoting going on, I'll note that Trump's derivative messaging from his own campaign to Reagan 84, where the Make America Great slogan came from, is a little bit like reboots and remixes that lean heavily on the past. In fact, it was Pastor Mace who once said, "We take hits from the 80s, but do it sound so crazy?" Well, isn't that the question for voters? Does this sound crazy? I want to bring in Jason Johnson, politics editor for The Root, and Victoria DeFrancesco Soto, professor at the University of Texas. Jason, we'd be remiss if we didn't note that Donald Trump plagiarized Reagan for Make America Great, and I don't know if you can technically plagiarize yourself, but he's certainly quoting his greatest hits from the last campaign. Will it work?
It's going to work, at least initially, because all he's going to be talking to is people who like his old hits. But like most people in concert, at some point they want to hear your new music. And that's what Donald Trump's going to end up running into next year. Look, this is somebody whose approval rating has always hovered around 42, 43%. He can't be reelected at 42, 43%. All right, he's got to find a way to actually expand his base. And if all he wants to do is throw people out of the country and continue to pick fights on Twitter, I don't see how that's going to help him against almost anybody he's running against next year.
And Victoria, there is no greater expert on what animates Trump's base than Ann Coulter, who may surprise some people tonight by saying that there are problems, they're just hidden because of the polarized environment. Folks aren't going to necessarily admit it. Let me read for your analysis what she says. A lot of wingers, that's her term, are desperately hanging on to Trump as flotsam in a tsunami. Loads of Trumpsters are actually besides themselves, she says, but almost none of them will say so publicly. I think the issue is how many voters who voted for Obama or didn't vote and then came out to vote for Trump are done with him.
To begin, that is some flowery language, Ari. You know, when it comes to Trump's base, though, I see it more as feeding the beast. So I don't know about having hidden pockets here or there, but it's really about giving this base something that they can chew on continually. He might soften up on immigration as he gets into the general, something that he did in 2016, but he's going to continue giving them tidbits because, as Jason said, he can't win with the base alone. He needs to figure out a way to also bring those moderate Republicans who are going to pinch their nose and hopefully vote for Trump as far as his campaign sees it. So he's going to keep that core message, but at the same time, you know, let up on it as he gets into the general is my crystal balling here.
Yeah, and Jason, some of the worst data for him is not in these hypothetical head-to-head matchups, which we don't actually cover that much because we don't see a lot of evidence that they project much, but rather in some of the slipping in, of all places, a Fox News poll about what do people who are affiliated with his coalition, with his base, white voters who didn't go to college, what do they think now, a couple of years in, about how Trump's economic policies are working? Take a look at this very basic question. When you ask those particular voters, they call them whites with no college degree, who do Trump's economic policies help? People with more money, 45%. People like me, you can barely see the red register at the bottom of your screen, 5%, Jason. In other words, almost no voters who would be in that coalition, whites without a college degree, actually say or believe that right now, today, Trump's policies help them economically.
So this is the thing, Ari, and I'm going to love saying this, and Vicky, we went to grad school together. She's going to get at me for saying this, but this is the truth. Economics doesn't drive why people vote. The biggest lie in analysis is that people vote their pocketbook. No, they don't. They vote their hearts, and then they rationalize it later with their pocketbooks. How many times are we going to see articles and polls that say people who are suffering in Ohio and suffering in Indianapolis, and they're losing jobs, and they're losing jobs to Mexico, and they're losing jobs to China, but they're still going to vote for Trump because at the end of the day, he makes them feel good. You don't buy that new car because it's fuel efficient. You buy it because you like the commercial, and you tell people you bought it for fuel efficiency. So even if the economy goes down, Trump's base is going to stay with him. The people he's going to lose are the folks in the margins in Cobb County and the suburbs of Pennsylvania who are like, I voted for the guy because I thought he'd be different from Hillary, but he's really been more of the swamp than she was. Well,
Victoria, at the risk of going, you know, full Richard Hofstadter here, Jason is saying it's status politics, not interest politics. You may be the most decorated academic on the panel. Enlighten us.
Hardly. No. Hey, look, I'm agreeing with Jason here with the base. It's aspirational politics. He's selling a brand, and people want to be like Trump. They want to, you know, be rich and famous, and they feel that aspiration. It's marketing 101. But where I do see the pocketbook being a really big consideration are for those country club Republicans, where they may not like Trump in terms of his social policy, his moral policy. They don't like the guy. He cheats at golf. They just don't like him. But for their pocketbooks and their business books, they feel that he does work. So I think that we need to parse out the electorate between the base, the no-college whites, and the country club Republicans.
Well, and the other limit on this, obviously, which I don't think Jason's disagreeing with, is how is the economy doing? In other words, how much will people put that stuff aside unless they're in a serious recession? Suddenly they're thinking maybe a little bit more about it. Both of you stay with me. I want to bring in another guest and another point here, which is that Trump's rhetoric on immigration obviously is in relief to the way he lives his life, what many call his hypocrisy in his businesses. Consider how many Trump properties have both hired and then fired employees who worked there for years and were undocumented, and many who say, of course their bosses knew.
Gabriel says President Trump spoke with him during his years at the club and suspects the president also knew there were undocumented workers on staff.
I cannot, be sure about that, but, he gotta know.
You think the president must have known?
He must know.
That's from some of our NBC reporting. And Anibal Romero represents the man you just saw on your screen, as well as some other workers who say they were fired from Trump businesses. Now, you're in Orlando today. What is your view of all of this? And should it matter to voters if Donald Trump ran a private business that did the very thing he says he's against in public policy?
Well, yeah, of course it should matter. First of all, it's a federal crime to knowingly hire undocumented immigrants. And what we now know, we didn't know a few months ago, based on what my clients are saying, is that possibly hundreds of undocumented immigrants have been working for the Trump organization, not only in New York and New Jersey, but now we hear of undocumented workers at the winery in Virginia. And this is something that the American people, either some Trump voters are choosing to ignore or do not want to focus on, because I think the important part here is that there are 11 million people, undocumented immigrants, who are living in the United States. Employers are taking advantage of them. And unless we have comprehensive immigration reform, many more businesses are going to continue to hire undocumented immigrants.
Is your core point, oh, this is like a bad thing and Trump did it in business, or this is kind of an unavoidable thing in our economy, so of course he did it?
Well, look, 11 million people are living here. 9 million people are part of the workforce. Unless we have comprehensive immigration reform, employers are going to continue to hire them. We know it is virtually impossible to remove 11 million people from the United States. Last night, when Donald Trump tweeted that he was getting ready to deport people from the United States, the first thing we thought about was maybe he's doing this because he knows his workers, people who worked at his house, were coming to Orlando to shine a light on a problem.
But you're not saying that itself is some terrible thing. You're just saying it's hypocrisy.
It's absolute hypocrisy, absolutely.
Victoria, what do you think about this? I mean, it is rare to have, as we all know, someone who's had as many employees and done as much public business as Donald Trump. I do think it gets lost on voters. It could get very confusing. He lies a lot about his business. His businesses are opaque and secretive. And then you have stories like this that clearly cut against the perception around the businesses.
It speaks to the larger lack of getting at the real root cause of immigration to this country, which is demand. Folks want to hire undocumented persons. Folks have the desire to do so, the need to do so for their businesses, and so that's why folks come over. But instead, what Trump has done is try to attack illegal immigration through building a wall, through saying that government-funded housing programs can't accept undocumented or mixed-status families. So he's tried to do everything except going at the real root cause of undocumented immigration for the vast majority of undocumented immigrants. And he's part of this problem. If we start with him, if we start fining him the fines that we should be fining employers, then the numbers of undocumented people would go down. But I think it's much easier to distract and try to do these other operations of dealing with undocumented immigrants.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. And Anibal, given that you have people whose lives are so profoundly affected in ways I'm sure they wouldn't have imagined when they started working there. They were working for someone who was going to run for office to try to stop the thing they say he was literally doing. So really appreciate you joining the broadcast, Anibal and Victoria. And Jason stays with me, so stick around. I got to fit in a break, but coming up, Donald Trump